China is completely changing how luxury watches work by making incredible quality watches that cost way less than Swiss brands. These Chinese watches look amazing, work great, and cost so little that luxury watch companies are getting really worried. Nobody expected Chinese watchmakers to get this good this fast. Today we're showing you the top 10 Chinese watches that are shocking the entire watch world. Number 10. Seagull 1963 Chronograph 250. The Seagull 1963 Chronograph is a cool Chinese watch that copies an old military watch from the 1960s. This watch has a clear see-through back so you can watch all the tiny gears moving inside, which is super cool. It costs only $250 but looks like watches that cost thousands of dollars from fancy Swiss companies. The watch has a stopwatch built in so you can time things like races or how long you hold your breath. Chinese watchmakers are getting really good at making these mechanical watches that don't need batteries and run on tiny springs. The leather strap feels nice and the watch isn't too big, so it fits kids and adults comfortably. You can see through the glass back and watch the gears spinning, which is like having a tiny machine on your wrist. Swiss watch companies charge way more money for watches that aren't much better than this Chinese one. At $250, this shows how China is making luxury watches affordable for everyone. Number 9. Pagani Design Daytona Homage 120. The Pagani Design Daytona Homage is a Chinese watch that looks almost exactly like a super expensive Rolex Daytona watch. The real Rolex Daytona costs $15,000, but this Chinese copy costs only $120. It has a stopwatch built in with 3 small circles on the face that show different timing information. The watch uses a Japanese quartz movement, which means it runs on a tiny battery and keeps perfect time. Chinese companies are making these look-alike watches so well that you need to look really closely to tell the difference. The metal bracelet feels solid and shiny, just like expensive watches, even though it costs so little money. Luxury watch brands hate these Chinese copies because they show their watches are way overpriced for what you get. The glass on top is mineral crystal, which means it won't scratch as easily as plastic, but isn't as tough as sapphire. At $120, this proves you don't need thousands of dollars for a nice-looking watch. Number 8. San Martin Submariner Homage 280. The San Martin Submariner Homage is a Chinese dive watch that copies the famous Rolex Submariner but costs way less. This watch can go underwater up to 200 meters, which is deeper than almost anyone will ever swim or dive. It has a rotating bezel on the outside that divers use to time how long they've been underwater safely. The watch uses a Japanese automatic movement, which means it winds itself as you move your arm around. Chinese watchmakers put sapphire crystal glass on top, which is super hard and almost impossible to scratch like diamonds. The watch glows in the dark so you can see the time at night or underwater when it's completely dark. Swiss Rolex Submariners cost $10,000, but this Chinese version works almost as well for just $280. The metal bracelet feels heavy and quality just like expensive watches, even though it's made in China. At $280, this shows China is making professional dive watches for cheap prices. Number 7. Baltony Dirty Dozen Field Watch 180. The Baltony Dirty Dozen Field Watch is a Chinese watch copying old British military watches from World War II. The watch has big, clear numbers so soldiers could read the time quickly even in bad lighting or combat. It costs $180 but looks just like vintage military watches that collectors pay thousands for. The watch has a handwind movement, which means you twist the crown every day to wind up the spring inside. Chinese companies are getting really good at making these vintage-style watches that look old but work perfectly. The canvas strap looks like old military equipment and feels comfortable even when you wear it all day. You can see through the back and watch the movement working, which is educational and fun to look at. British military watches from the 1940s cost huge amounts of money, but this Chinese copy gives you the same look. At $180, this proves vintage style doesn't need vintage prices anymore. Number 6. Fille d'Aquanaut Homage 150. The Fille d'Aquanaut Homage is a Chinese watch that looks like the super expensive Patek Philippe Aquanaut watch. The real Patek Philippe costs $26,000, but this Chinese version costs only $150. It has a textured dial that looks like woven fabric, creating a cool pattern you can see up close. The watch uses a Japanese automatic movement that winds itself and doesn't need batteries ever, which is better for environment. Chinese watchmakers are proving you can make beautiful luxury-looking watches without charging crazy high prices like Swiss brands. The rubber strap feels soft and comfortable and won't get damaged by water or sweat during sports. The case is made from steel and feels solid like expensive watches, even though it costs so little money. Luxury brands like Patek Philippe charge huge amounts just for the name, but Chinese watches work just as well. At $150, this shows luxury watch style is available to normal people now. Number 5. Merkur Pilot's Chronograph, $400. The Merkur Pilot's Chronograph is a Chinese watch made for airplane pilots with lots of useful features built in. This watch has a stopwatch function with a special scale that helps calculate speed and distance during flights. It costs $400, which sounds like a lot, but pilot watches from Swiss brands cost $5,000. The watch uses a Chinese mechanical movement that's getting better quality every year, surprising watch experts everywhere. Chinese companies are learning how to make complicated watch movements with chronographs that used to only come from Switzerland. The leather strap looks professional, and the big case makes it easy to read the time quickly. You can see through the back and watch the chronograph mechanism working, which shows impressive Chinese engineering. Pilot watches need to be reliable and accurate because pilots use them for important navigation and timing. At $400, this proves China can make professional pilot watches for regular prices. Number 4. Chrono Submariner, $320. The Chrono Submariner is a Chinese dive watch that uses the best Japanese movement and Chinese manufacturing together. This watch can go 200 meters underwater and has all the features professional divers need for safety. It costs $320 but has sapphire crystal and ceramic bezel, like watches costing thousands more. The watch uses a Seiko NH35 movement from Japan, which is super reliable and easy to fix if needed. Chinese watchmakers are combining the best parts from Japan and China to make watches better than pure Swiss alternatives. The bracelet has solid metal links that don't rattle or feel cheap like you'd expect from budget watches. Ceramic bezel means the numbers won't fade or scratch even after years of hard use and abuse. Swiss dive watches cost 10 times more but don't work 10 times better than this Chinese alternative at all. At $320, this shows China is making dive watches as good as Switzerland. Number 3. Suges Tourbillon Chronograph all-in-200. The Suges Tourbillon Chronograph is a Chinese watch with a tourbillon, which is a super complicated spinning mechanism inside. Tourbillons are usually only in Swiss watches costing $50,000 or more because they're hard to make. This Chinese watch costs only $1,200 but has a real working tourbillon you can watch spinning. The tourbillon spins around once per minute to make the watch more accurate by fighting against gravity's effects. Chinese watchmakers learned how to make tourbillons, showing they can build the most complicated watch mechanisms now. The watch also has a chronograph stopwatch built in, making this even more complicated and impressive to see. You can watch the tourbillon spinning through the front dial, which is mesmerizing and beautiful to look at. Swiss watch companies are shocked that China can make tourbillons this cheaply because it breaks their expensive pricing. At $1,200, this proves Chinese watchmaking has reached the highest levels of skill. Number 2. Atelier Wen Perception Caoza 800. The Atelier Wen Perception is a fancy Chinese watch brand, making original designs instead of copying Swiss watches. This watch has a beautiful blue dial with a special pattern inspired by Chinese porcelain art and culture. It costs $1,800, which is more expensive, but the quality and design are completely original. The watch uses a Swiss movement because the brand wants the best reliability while keeping Chinese design and manufacturing. Chinese watch brands are starting to create their own unique styles instead of just copying famous Swiss watches. The case finishing is done by hand with polishing techniques that make it shine like mirrors perfectly. Luxury watch collectors are starting to buy Chinese watches because the design and quality are getting really impressive. The brand tells stories about Chinese culture through the watch designs, making them meaningful beyond just telling time. At $1,800, this shows China is creating original luxury watches competing with Switzerland. Number 1. Seagull Tourbillon ST8000K 40500. The Seagull Tourbillon ST8000K is the best Chinese watch, proving China has become a watchmaking superpower that nobody expected. This watch has a tourbillon spinning mechanism that Swiss brands usually charge $50,000 or more to get. The Chinese tourbillon costs only $4,500, but works just as well as Swiss tourbillons costing 10 times more. Seagull is the biggest Chinese watch company, and they've been making tourbillons since 1996, before most people knew about them. The watch has a skeleton dial, which means you can see all the gears and springs working inside like a tiny machine. Chinese watchmakers have proven they can make the most complicated watch mechanisms as well as the famous Swiss companies. The finishing quality on the movement is beautiful, with decorated parts and polished surfaces just like expensive Swiss watches. Luxury watch brands are really worried because Chinese tourbillons prove their expensive prices are just about brand names, not actual quality.